today. Okay. But we're here now. And in this space, we open into the true nature of who we are and share that together. So if everybody will just close their eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. And we use the breath to fall into that spacious source reality that is the sea we swim in, the consciousness we arise in. And as we exhale, we go deeper and wider. It's an ocean of awareness, awake awareness, awareness aware of itself, and our knowing that we are that. Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that awareness, scintillating, arising, overflowing, the source of all materiality, all images, all experiences, everything arises here. When we come home to this space, we know that it is home and we find refuge here, closing our eyes and dropping into this amazing experience of awareness. In this coming home, in this dropping in, there is absolutely no doubt that this is Source. And as we relax our mind out of limitation, there is no doubt that I am that. The knowing of awareness, the coming home to experiencing ourselves as free and happy and peaceful, and this sense of dissolving into this larger field of awareness. We know ourselves as Source. It is amazing grace, relaxing out of the mind and into the heart, allowing everything to arise as vital and alive and scintillating. Life does not require our mind. Life is alive and well, and in knowing ourselves as that, we relax our minds. We relax our minds and fall into our hearts and expand that spacious, awake awareness. And so it is. Thank you all for coming and being here. Local, non-local.
So Kim has joined,
Okay,
and Faith,
okay,
and Mahalia has joined.
all right.
I think they've got everybody, Pamela,
It was a slow start today, but now we're all here.
and now Priya is just joined us as well.
Priya, is she here in the,
No, she's
here on Zoom?
here in the Zoom.
Right. So sometimes I realize that what we can all benefit from together, because this gathering creates a kind of a space, a coherence. This gathering technologically and in person here creates a field in which we can experience and receive a level of information that sometimes doesn't come through when I'm doing like one-on-one sessions with somebody. We create here a coherent field in which there's a receptivity. And so I don't know if, I'm not sure, I may have done the same thing last week, by the way. But if your memory's like mine, we're all together here. Yeah, the quote that comes to mind is from one of my teachers from years back. He had a teaching that was from what he called the field center, and it was about the quantum field. And when I first came upon the information, it was in 2007, I think. And I saw a little brochure that was in a fitness center, and it said, reality is in the identity of the beholder. And that was just like, I thought, it was like the clouds parted in that moment. You know how these things happen when you'll see the title of a book or you'll hear something, and it just is like that, the resonance with that opens you into what's next for you sometimes. I think we've all had that experience. But the way in which our reality is in our identity can elude us. It's a very slippery, because the mind is slippery. And the mind is not always truthful. The mind has an agenda. And so oftentimes we delude ourselves and are not available for acknowledging what in fact could be the most freeing thing that we can understand. And that is who we believe we are, and how that creates a distortion field that we call reality. The distortion field, it's like, I readily mix metaphors and go to kindergarten models without notice. So be prepared. The distortion field is like, I used to talk about there being a lens through which we perceive and receive, but now I understand it as a field. And the distortion field is at the center. It's generated by our conclusion about ourselves and our belief about ourselves as being limited, fear-based persons. And all of us have done childhood wound work. I mean, if there's any topic that's up right now, it's childhood trauma. Does anybody miss that? I mean, I can't see screens very well, but the thing, whatever I click on, it's going to be Gabor Mate talking about childhood traumas, right? Yeah. And it's so important that come into the awareness of the collective. The problem with it is that if you still identify with that and you think that's the entire story about who you are, then you never receive the benefit of a larger understanding, which is the consciousness approach. and which comes to bear in this conversation with how we created a distortion field. So if the lens, the installation from the earliest conclusion, and all of us have these pat kind of statements like, I don't matter, I'm not good enough, there's nothing here for me. Anybody got more? What some of them, what are the ones that we all, anyway, all of those are like labels. They're like installations that point to the repressed identity that creates the projection of a field that is laden with the frequency, the energy of that conclusion. And so there isn't anything that can show up for you that is not informed by that conclusion. The reason it can be confusing is because our minds work on the basis of polarity. Right? That was the information we were supposed to get in the garden early on with good and evil, black and white, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. So the mind is caught in polarity. And so even though most of our distortion field is going to be disappointing if we believe I don't matter, it's going to be apparently not for us, if that's our conclusion or any of those conclusions. We can also have the experience of the other end of the stick. And that can look like narcissism. That can look like self-involvement. It can look like somebody who's just so full of themselves that their reality is all about them. And that's the whole story. The problem with that are it's not a problem, but the ongoing explication of that being a polarity is that the other end of the stick, it will arise, and it will arise in experience. You know, if I believe I'm not good enough and I'm having a cycle of success or connection or whatever I value, so that I think, oh my gosh, I'm finally good enough, right? So that information is out of the distortion field, right? And so then the other end of the stick comes up. We know all about, because of technology and the media and so forth, ones that we would have thought had made it, whether it's a celebrity, a huge popularity and valuing of what they bring, what they offer, whatever their gift and talent is. And then for them to do the unthinkable, for all of us who think they're on the top of the heap, having made it, they take their own life. Because that polarity is at work there. That underlying conclusion is creating in their experience a distortion field. Now, we all don't check out just because of the distortion field, but most of us are caught in it until we start to have the ability to observe it to some degree. And that ability has to do with observing what has created an idea about who I am that has this deep self-judgment, like I'm not good enough or I don't matter. As that gets installed, then it's permeating everything. Now, because it's so abhorrent to us to have that kind of self-judgment, it's repressed immediately. But from that repressed place, it is emitted. It's a frequency. And the frequency of that self-judgment, all the self-judgments that create ego identities, the frequency is one of fear. It's one of self-denial, self-rejection. And so when it shows up in our world, in what I call the distortion field, we believe that other people are doing it to us. It's an amazing wonderment, truly, to understand our part in the way our reality shows up, and the way people show up in our reality, representing or saying something that triggers us, right? So the problem with, not the problem, I said the issue with the whole idea of trauma is that if that's what happened to you, then your nervous system is informed by it, and that's true. That's absolutely true. The body takes the hit of whatever is going on. What's not true is that you need to do therapy on your idea of that person that you believe you are because of that trauma. Because that's a fool's errand, and it can go on forever. And this is why most all of us here in this room and on the Zoom call have done tons of work at what I call the level of the problem. The level of the problem is your fear-based ego identity, and you cannot undo that by working on it. It can be relieved, it can be shifted, it can be altered slightly, but it's the core of your distortion field. So what we can count on is being triggered so that pulls us into what we've been believing that's now showing up in our external reality because of the distortion field. It's distorted in the way that triggers or reclaims for us that experience of not being good enough, or of not mattering, or of what are some others? I'm not thinking very well today. What are some more labels we do? I'm a piece of shit.
Something's wrong.
Something's wrong with me.
Something's wrong. I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I'm a failure. I'll never
Low
make
self-esteem.
low self-esteem. Yeah, that whole feeling of lack of self-esteem. Yeah. So as that shows up in our world, we believe we have to change the world. And that's the lack of the opportunity that we in satsangs like this come upon, which is we can go to what is source in the matter, what is cause in the matter, and stop attributing cause to what is the effect, which is our external reality, and the cause of which is our deepest self-denying conclusion. So all of you here and on the Zoom call know that the process I use for dealing with early childhood trauma and for suffering in our current reality is the 6 steps to freedom process, but it can be modified in many ways. The most important thing about it is that it's not therapeutic. We're not trying to undo or mitigate or soften the early conclusion. We're not going to stand in front of the mirror like the guy on Saturday Night Live used to do and say, I am a good person. I like myself. I am loved. We're not going to do that because that's at the level of the problem. But when you're triggered, what you are going to do is to allow yourself to come into the experience in this dynamic, whatever's going on in your world, and find the early memory of feeling that way, because it's on the feeling scale that you go back in. That early, and it's amazing, through free association, sitting with a feeling of rejection or being ignored or being unkindly treated, sitting with that feeling, the memories will arise because they occurred early on. Early on. We sometimes find them prenatally. The birth mother may have been considering abortion, and the fetus gets the frequency, the hit of I don't deserve to live. That goes into the body mind, even though there's no language there. And so as we come back through the feeling into the memory, and there will be memories that match that, even if you're not going into past lives or womb experience, there are going to be experiences in early childhood that match that. And so right there, you start to come home to yourself. In that space that we were in the meditation, I think of that as being the heart space in which we can invite the wounded child in. And it's like, I'm the one you've been waiting for. I am, as awareness, as consciousness, There is that available. That's never been, we've never been totally caught up, and all of our awareness, our awake awareness, caught up in that woundedness. That is peripheral in a very specific way. If you can see it, you know that it's a creation. Every one of us here has had the opportunity or the experience of seeing the early memory and seeing the conclusion that the 2-year-old or the 3-year-old or the 5-year-old made about themselves. And in that seeing, we are actually experience our true nature as awareness that can see it. And the creation that's arising, the consciousness that's being confiscated on behalf of an identity that's absolutely created by an experience that was unavoidable and a conclusion that was never true. So this is the arena in which we do this work here. This is consciousness work. This is not therapeutic. Like I said before, every one of us in here have done many, many approaches to solving the problem of identity at the level of the problem, trying to experience and forgive ourselves in whatever way for the trauma, forgive our parents usually. But this is a more fundamental interaction at the level of what is cause in the matter. And again, the cause is what we believe about ourselves. And then we create a world that's informed by that frequency. Every one of the frequencies that partakes of a childhood wound, all of the denigration and the dissing of ourselves there, all of them are based in a frequency of fear. And so we have a world in which now our identity is in place. I'm not good enough. And we have a world that shows us all the time that I'm not good enough. And when it's showing us that you're not only are you good enough, you're the best one, right? Look at that one. That there's a quaking underneath because there's a fundamental self-concept that I'm an imposter, or they're going to find out, or that can't be true. So there's not going to be any solution at that level. We are coming back home to cause in the matter. And what that looks like is seeing this distortion field and what that's experienced like, which is absolute a miracle, gold, is that when you get triggered, you can go to that, what that early wounding was. And so we have access through what offends us. We have access through being insulted. We have access through being ignored. That's how we come home to what we're believing that's creating a world through the distortion field. That is, we are absolutely convinced that it's about them. And this is the gospel, the good news. Yeah, it's about you. Thank God. We know it's about me. And that is the freedom, and that's, like I said, that's the good news. So I'll probably be repeating this often because there's great resistance to it in our inner being. We've gotten to some degree satisfaction and pleasure from making somebody else responsible for our experience, as if it could ever be true. So we are at the opportunity now collectively, because of technology and so many aware beings who are connecting and expressing and sharing this information about how we create. You know, New Age has been banding around for decades. You create your own reality. I used to have a kind of a real, it seemed offensive to me. But the way in which I understand it now gives, it's true, but not at the level of manifestation, although that's true too. What am I going to say? Okay, so what's not true is that when the ego heard you create your own reality, I was around then decades ago, right? All the New Age movement. And when the ego heard that, the ego took it on like, oh yeah, I can do that. I got that one, you know. See, the reality is the way in which we are responsible and connected and unfolding a reality has to do with the frequency of who we're being. And the frequency of who we're being is fundamentally distorted and limited by the early childhood conclusion. So in clearing that up, we release the frequency of fear. And because the frequency of who we already eternally are, that is a high frequency of unconditional love. It's love beyond the human mind or experience to express or to understand. But we know it even when we go into meditation together. We feel that field of opportunity, of love, of connection. So the frequency that we're working on here is when you see through what's caused your experience, what I call the distortion field that was created by the early conclusion. When you can see that clearly, and in the 6 steps to freedom process, and in a process I used with Ho'oponopono priorly, what we bring to it is the forgiving ourselves for ever having believed something that could never be true. So we're coming home as awareness, as consciousness. And in that spaciousness, we simply clear out the frequency of fear that arises in cohabiting that identity. Because if we feel that we're not good enough or we don't matter, that's a fearful conclusion. And so the fear frequency is pretty much creating the distortion field with the specificity of our identity. That's why it seems so confounding, right? And I understand that. So today, I want to, and I probably, like I said, this is the most important information that I've come upon and what occurred here in this body-mind unit, when the psychological self, which had been created by an early conclusion, fell away. So the work that we're all doing together is whenever you clear that falsehood, you are shifting reality in 2 different ways. You're shifting the field that shows up as your life, the distortion field, and the frequency of fear that's fallen away, the frequency of love that's arising will create a reality, a different reality. We can redream this world and not have it be fear-based and alienated and other. It's a frequency reality. That's another conversation probably, although I'll probably get there in a minute. It's a frequency reality, the frequency of our distorted, limited, broken-hearted self-judgment is the frequency of fear. It's based in duality, it's based in the mind, and it creates all of the difficulty that we all deal with individually, collectively, and planetarily at this point. It's a frequency reality. When the frequency is released out of the confines of fear and limitation, that frequency will create a different reality. And it does for each one of us when we do, which everybody in here has had the experience of a shifting identity and frequency. And when collectively we have fallen out of the fear-based insistence on separation and limitation, then there will be a different reality. And that will happen it happens whenever you clear the distortion field with your early childhood wound conclusion. Your reality will be different. Everybody in here has had the experience of synchronicities and things showing up magically. And that starts to be the nature of reality once the distortion field is clear. And we clear that through forgiving ourselves for believing a lie that could never be true. Okay, everybody with me? The hallelujah time.
Hallelujah.
Yay.
Oh, good.
Pali, would you elaborate more on the last step? I've always done well up to the forgiveness part. That's the part I tend to not click in with. I'd love to hear you just like what's the segue in there? How can we be better at remembering or what that's about, or the languaging, or anything you'd like to say?
Good, Grace, thank you. Yeah, the forgiveness part is this is the distinction between therapy and this model of shifting frequency. The forgiveness part is to realize that you can see what you concluded, you can see how it's outworked, you can see what triggered you into the process in this instance, and you can see what you believed about yourself. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. And so now what you're having an experience of, even though and it's good to acknowledge it, you're having an experience of awareness looking at what this limiting self-conclusion was. Awareness is now front and center, looking at, I'm not good enough. And in that moment, awareness becomes like sunlight on mold. We call it forgiveness. I forgive myself for ever having believed that I'm not good enough. And in the same way, I often use the parable of the snake and the rope. In the same way that the snake starts to show up as a rope and then even disintegrate, that's what happens with this conclusion. It's like the child that concluded that unavoidably out of early childhood experience, maybe past life experience, but concluded that unavoidably is now like I am here now, I, awareness, am with you. And we forgive ourselves for believing that we're not good enough. That sounds like a little bit of a duality, but there is an aspect of consciousness that still identifies with the wounded child. And sometimes it's helpful to acknowledge that. But I think what you're asking is when it's alchemical. Forgiveness is like sunlight on mold, and it dispels everything. Everything falls away. It's nearly like the opposite of therapy in the sense that things are not enhanced by working on them. The work that we do here is the allowing the memory to come up, to looking at the conclusion, and then through forgiveness to dispel it. Does that help you with the forgiveness thing?
I have always understood that. It's the part I was looking for some support in is I forget to do, I forget, or I don't link up easily to the forgiveness, but like say mine is, something's wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. Now the world is reflecting something's wrong with me. And it's not a natural flow to just go into boy, that I forgive myself for ever having believed something's wrong with me. And then all of a sudden it lifts. It's not that easy. It doesn't lift so easily.
Okay, so who is it that's knowing there's something wrong with me?
The one who's going back in time and looking to see, oh, there's that belief. There's a belief.
Right.
So somebody's aware there's a belief,
Right.
that there's some belief in there that agrees to that.
Right.
And so it's really hard for me to ask my question. All I know is I don't get to that forgiveness part so easily.
Right. Well, we have investment in not forgiving ourselves. We have created an entire reality and a persona. But the thing that you just pointed to, which is accurate, is that it's the awareness that's seeing that early memory. It's awareness that's seeing that label, that conclusion. It's like knowing yourself as that, right?
I think there's some voice in there going, maybe it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can forgive yourself for it, but we're not good enough, or any of those little things that everybody had on weed, or maybe I can forgive myself for thinking that, but hey, how do I know? Maybe it's true. Maybe what they told me, and of course that's not an awareness. That's
what you're doing now is just circling up with your earliest conclusion.
right.
And
So how can I forgive myself?
Well, you have to see that that's what that is, and you can see because you saw initially because you were triggered, right?
Right.
I'm experiencing this, the seeing in and of itself, the experience of seeing something creates the distinction between who I am and what I have. That little mind thing that was going on about it may be true. And I think it really happened. I think I am not good enough. I'm pretty sure that's true. Like all of that. Yeah. That's the mind going off. You can see that. Yeah. You can see that pattern. You can report it to me. So you must be able to see it.
I struggle with the oversimplification of that step. Like, oh, okay, so all I have to do now is forgive myself for believing that, and then on we go, and I'm not fucked up anymore.
Well, it must not be simple for you since you can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even if something's forgiving me, say I did forgive myself, then we just,
Who would that be that forgave you?
who would it be that forgives me? It's my higher self, maybe,
It's awareness.
something
Yeah.
like that.
And
Or
identified as that, you see the pattern of the early wounding and the life story that went with it, and the way that early wound leads you to think this is probably true. I think it's really true. I'm not good enough. What do you mean forgiveness? Right? But that whole thing is being seen by awareness. You can't see the awareness. I mean, this is the most fundamental, as we get through this map in consciousness, this is a fundamental part. If you can perceive it, if you can see it, it's an object. I don't care if it's a childhood wound or a mouse in the living room. It's an object. It can be handled, it can be picked up, it can be seen, it can be forgiven.
So I would imagine it requires a good amount of repetition as these patterns arise again, and next week it arises, and a month from now it arises. So, and that forgiveness step has to be done each time.
And it
one
becomes,
sees
yes,
the pattern.
right. Yeah, because not to belabor the point, but we've all been working on this identity for more than one lifetime. And the forgiveness hasn't shown up till now. The idea that you can forgive it once. And I mean, this is like layered, and I sometimes call it a gnarly ball of yarn, or it can be layered, but whatever piece comes up. Meantime, if you're present on your own behalf as awareness, right? You have this body mind, you have this reality going on, and something shows up, you know what to do with it. And in the meantime, if nothing shows up, you're just happy. We don't have to make shit up. It will show up. You will be triggered, and that gives you access. You are the one that wounded, traumatized, self-hating child has been waiting for. Not therapy, not being convinced that she's good, but awareness shining on the illusion that there can be anything other than love. It's just not true. It's not love like this transactional shit that goes on in this reality. It's the power of creation. And we are that. Right? Not as a body-mind unit are we that, but as the space in which realities arise. That includes the body-mind unit. Thank you, Grace. I know
That was beautiful.
it's a sticky place. I know.
Hey, good. Maybe we continue to.
We will.
That was great.
So if anyone else has a question. I don't see a hand. Huh? I think Malia, did you have a hand up? Mahalia?
Where's
muted.
Mahalia?
You're muted.
She's muted.
Sorry. So there's a recognition of the underlying pattern, and then there's forgiveness. And then from that, what is it doesn't seem to me to be from there to a self dropping away, the sense of self. What happens where when the tire hits the pavement? What's going on there? What after the forgiveness and the recognition? What goes on? What gets one over the hump there?
Well, the real hump is the deluded, self-judging conclusion, of course. When that drops away, there's a way. It's a really interesting question, Mahalia. When self-judgment drops away, which is what we're doing with the forgiveness, I forgive myself for ever believing I'm not good enough, all of that self-judgment, when that falls away, then the experience, because that is the creation of the psychological self. That wound conclusion was the creation of the psychological self. When that falls away, there's no identity there. Then there is this body-mind unit with its human design, its astrology, its gifts, and so forth, right?
Yep,
But there's no judgment anymore, because all the judgment came from that distortion field of our conclusion about ourselves. That was the source of all judgment. So now you're connected. You don't feel separation because only judgment separates. So the field is alive and well, and it's so there are a couple of things. The judgment falls away, so you feel connected to whatever and whomever appropriately, happily, and you also don't experience time as linear sequential, fearfully. It's fear that creates linear sequential time, right? So that's the experience. When that occurs, I kind of hear underlying what your question is, that it's like, if my mind's not making it up, what the hell would be happening and why would I bother, right? Probably not that, but like that. Yeah.
exactly no. I guess it goes in tandem with this other thing, which is this different times when self has fallen away, when there's been like a quote mystical experience, whatever, call it that. It doesn't strike me that what happened was that I got to the underlying cause of a distortion field or anything. It just seemed to have happened like, I don't know why, grace, what they call grace, just happens.
Right. Well, it's what's true. So it's going to bleed through sometimes, even with our best efforts to avoid being happy, right? It's going to come through because it's who we are. So it arises sometimes in the most unexpected, like you're pointing to. It's like Surprised by Joy, the name of that C.S. Lewis book about his second wife, or his wife. So we're surprised by true nature, the sense of connection and peace and ease, right? But that's like, we're always it's like a little tap on the shoulder. It's like, this is who you really are. And so, yeah. It's often called, I think, in Dzogchen, short moments of the relaxing out of the mind and the fear frequency and into the heart and the fullness of that.
Yes, it seems like it's been when the mind just dropped away.
That's right.
It wasn't like I was thinking or had realized some core distortion. It just the mind stopped completely.
All right.
Is that the same one and the same thing?
Yeah, so that was a short moment, an opening into what's true, what's already true, that gets obfuscated by our confiscating consciousness, awareness on behalf of the configuration. We're powerful creators. You believe something, you believe you're not good enough, and you're going to create a world. And these are little breakthroughs out of that belief bubble, that distortion field. Of course, we're going to get to experience love and connection and peace and all the things, because that's who we are. And even, like I said, in our best efforts, we will not, especially people like us who've been on a spiritual path for this lifetime. So it remains that the trigger is the access to whatever is left of the early wounding and the experience of the distortion field that creates, identity with that. The triggers are gold. It's like, hurt my feelings, please. Thank you, Mahalia.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Priya has a question. She's saying, instead of using the word forgiveness, isn't it just awareness of holding a pattern and just acknowledging it and holding it in love?
That would work. Yeah. Yeah. The reason we use the word forgiveness is because the 6 steps are derived from A Course in Miracles. And the forgiveness is the fundamental approach to clearing out what's not true. So I think that's why. But the awareness shining on the lie of I'm not good enough can dispel it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Priya.
She sends a heart.
Ah.
Anyone in the room or in the Zoom room who has a question? We have about 10 more minutes of Q&A before we go into our long meditation. And I also just want to say, if there's ever a time someone wants to speak and they don't want it recorded, I can stop the recording and then restart it when you're done. If that's ever an issue for someone. Yeah, bad.
I just wanted to report on this book that I told you about, Mom Polly. The one about the quantum field, yeah.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing that came up for me just now listening to this discussion was that Einstein and Bohr and the Copenhagen school decided that the implications of the quantum field were kind of intolerably crazy.
Right.
Entanglement and all the weirdness, spookiness from a distance and so forth. And there was an American kind of genius from the 50s named Hugh Everett who studied at Princeton, and he basically said we should just embrace the weirdness, and that what's implied by the quantum field is a total object, and that everything other than that object is unreal. So everything that we experience because of our position is an illusion. And the only thing that's real is the whole, is the totality. And that's the quantum totality. And that's not graspable. But the interesting thing that was occurring to me in terms of just the way we were talking in this discussion was things like temperature, and that scientists have this sort of kind of reluctant rejection of the stability of even something like temperature.
Mm-hmm.
and matter and measurement and so forth. And anyway, I found that really exciting, the kind of confirmation of of a lot of ideas that are usually regarded as mystical by cutting edge science. Basically, science kind of catching up to
Right.
Mysticism.
Right.
And but also the functionality of quantum computing and quantum, so that at the one level, it's not just a kind of it's not just speculative, because so much of what they're talking about in quantum mechanics actually is applicable.
Right.
So anyway, that was my report. I've only read about a quarter of the book and it's not on tape, so I wanted to tell you what I was excited about.
Good. Yeah, it's really good, because the field is not it's so mind-boggling in a way. the field is what is, and the appearance of the appearances of what shows up there don't impact it. It's like it's
Mhm.
not used to create, right?
Right.
Just what they were saying, basically.
Right. But how do we experience classical, physical reality at all? And the theory that came up with that is by a guy named Zay, who said he calls it decoherence. And it just has to do with positionality. And it's funny though, it's kind of like, because it's almost like the question of evil. It's like, how do we feel separate? Why are we, how is separateness, if it's all a singular thing,
Mhm.
and there's a total quantum coherence in a single object, how is it that we're experiencing things individually? And that's actually the theory that I'm just sort of understanding a bit.
Well, we'll
But
wait.
it's called decoherence.
We'll look forward to next week and your report.
Yeah, you'll just have to all suffer until then
Right. Yeah.
in your singularity.
Right. Yeah, the experience, every time, because I can only use kindergarten models because I don't know the science, but every time this topic comes up, what I point to is, how do you have a dream at night where you are having such incredible, intense experiences, and there's nothing but mind going on? And that's what's true here. And even though and I think that explains, that gives, I believe the reason that we dream is so that we can grok this point.
Mm.
Yeah, because I mean, you can get, you can be attacked in a dream and you have a dream body that's in trouble, right?
Mm. Mm.
It's being assaulted or whatever. So it's all in mind. And mind, it creates experiences, but it doesn't create materiality.
Mhm.
And when it does, it can be dispelled because because it's mind. That's
Mhm.
yeah. And you're going to read that book on tape for me, aren't you? So I can listen
That
to
was
it.
my heroic intention, but I actually failed right away.
Yeah.
You just got probably all you're going to get from it.
Okay, thank you, Thad.
So Priya asks again, doesn't it all start with belief? If we don't believe we can end all war on the planet, for example, then how can it ever happen? Will it only happen when we truly believe that it is even possible?
That's accurate, but what it skips over is the shift that one can make. It sounds personal, it's not, but the shift that has to be made energetically. I think I said, I don't ever know if I said what last week, but I think I said that in A Course in Miracles, the origin was that this was all created, this realm of polarity and suffering was all created. And the way it describes it in the Course is, there was a tiny mad idea of not God, at which the Son of God forgot not to laugh. So what it's pointing to is that there's a shift in an illusory realm, where, because of the power of our connection to awareness, and we can create it, shaping it by our mind, like we do in a dream. But the belief about the possibility on the planet, it has to start with each one of us clearing out the fear-based belief that creates our difficulty in our lives. It has to start with us seeing through the imprinting of a self-limiting, self-negating identity, dissolving that. That's our greatest contribution, because when that occurs, like I was saying to Mahalia, the judgment falls away, the separation falls away, time disappears, and it's just, this is what's happening. And then that's a different reality. That happens individually as we wake up out of our fear-based identity and its distortion field. Oh, but so it starts, it's like, there's something from New Age stuff I can't remember right now, but what it points to is that I do it. If it's going to happen, I do it. If I don't do it, it don't happen. It's kind of like that, because that field, frequency field of any one of us coming out of fear, coming out of limitation, coming out of the distortion field of believing there's something wrong with us, that changes the world. That's where cause in the matter resides, to point to the possibility of a shift in consciousness on this planet. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. We're going to shift into the meditation now. Thank you so much, Polly.
Thank you, everybody.
Please remember, this is by donation, and there's a donation basket here, and you can give donation by Venmo or PayPal if that's possible for you. Anything else you want to say?
No, thank you all for being here. It's so inspiring to do this work together, to be in agreement about what's possible, and to live happy, joyful lives together.
Yes.
You got a full house today, Polly.
Yeah.
Let the breakthrough happen. Huh?
Yeah, all right.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
Aloha.
we're going into a
Aloha,
45-minute
honey.
silent meditation now. You're welcome to stay, you're welcome to go. Enjoy.
Thank you, sweetie. Get back to Caroline. I'm curious. So glad you brought the topic. Yeah, well, it's disappeared. Bonnie on Maui. Bonnie on Maui, because it's not me. Here I am. Right here. Do I donate? My pleasure, donate, sir. I know. You might do that. Oh, I know. I know. So good news. Yes, such good news. Does that matter? Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Father.